Standing up in McKinney, this is According to Callus, coming to you on the 3rd of February, the year of our Lord 2025. It is a Monday. Now, normally I would do a McKinney Monday. However, there is a little bit of additional research that I need to do on a couple of things, especially regarding the elections that are going to be playing out. And I would be doing you a disservice if I were to weigh in now. So I'm going to wait, and I'll probably hit that on Wednesday or Friday. I apologize for missing out on Friday, but I figured since I got you nearly a double-length program on Wednesday, you would not be terribly disappointed. So today we're going to talk about respect is due. I'm going to have a couple of different contexts. It should be interesting. And before we get to that, before we jump into the meat of the show, let me remind you, the thing that you can do for me most, the thing that makes the difference, the thing that is, quite frankly, all important at this stage of the game is to like, share, and subscribe to this here podcast. Follow, add me to your podcatcher of choice. Follow me over on the social media of your choice. I am at Facebook. I have a page and a group. Like, share, subscribe, that kind of thing. You can join me over at MeWe, where I'll occasionally drop in on any number of different groups there. And on Gab, I am a pro. I've got my own post, if you will, and I chime in on a number of other groups, mostly with my own content. And quite frankly, you can find me occasionally on X. And for now, apparently, the show is still available over at YouTube, though it is hard to find. I've got darn near 800,000 downloads. I've got over 700 episodes in the can. And we're just going to keep on keeping on. We're doing our part to make a difference, both here in McKinney, Collin County, and Texas. And in case you forgot, it's Texas first, baby. All right. On to the program. Respect is due. So when I was a young man, I used to hear all the time, you don't have to respect the person, but you have to respect the office. Now, I've talked about this before. And I believe to an extent you do need to respect the office. We can start with the most simple thing there is, i.e. you get pulled over while you're driving. A gentleman or a lady in a uniform with a badge and a gun and a taser and pepper spray and handcuffs approaches your vehicle. It is the wise thing to do to show proper respect. Now, whether you think they're right or wrong is irrelevant. Whether you think you've done nothing right or wrong, or you've done nothing wrong and you're all completely in the right, is now irrelevant. You are going to be dealing with somebody that can not only ruin your night, but potentially ruin your life. So show proper respect. Now, in effect, that person that's pulled you over may be wrong. They may be a jerk. You don't know, but why play with fire? Well, why upset the apple cart here? Now, most of the time, and I got to admit, I've had experiences being pulled over. Never pleasant, at least from my end of the equation, but almost universally, they have been professional and I guess respectful, because the theory is if you show respect, you'll get respect. And I like that. And I know that my sheriff in Collin County preaches that to his deputies. I assume that is a somewhat, well thought of way of doing things, but I don't know. Now, fortunately, I do my best to avoid meeting with officers of the law when they're doing business. I just find my life is much better that way. For the same reason that I tend to avoid interacting with judges, or for that matter, attorneys, on a professional basis. It's usually expensive and somewhat painful. But again, respect is due. You're probably not going to mouth off to a person wearing a robe. Again, they can wreck your night. They could potentially wreck your life. Show respect where respect is due. Now, that seems pretty simple, right? Because these people have control over us, whether we want to recognize it or not, whether we think it's appropriate or not. That's just the way the world works. Now, I got to tell you, when I was a very young man, I had an innate distrust and dislike for authority. Surprise, surprise. Now, when I enlisted in the military, I learned very quickly it was good to shut up. Unfortunately, some would say I probably didn't learn it fast enough, but I'd like to think that I picked up that, and I have tried to focus on that during most of my adult life. I.e., if I don't have to say something, I don't. If I'm going to add something, make sure it's worthwhile listening to, and generally, let the other person speak. Now, again, not perfect, don't claim to be. That does fall into your private life as well as your personal life. It's a good opportunity to learn how to let others talk. It's said that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can spend twice as much time listening instead of speaking. Again, I don't know if that's true, but it's something that's stuck with me. All right. That being said, that intro, that information laid down, now we got to deal with the concept of an elected official or a person that has a role in the hierarchy of the way things work. Now, I got to admit, there are a lot of elected officials that I'm less than enamored with, some that I'm quite disappointed with. But when I'm interacting with them, they're still the elected official. They still have a responsibility, not just to me personally or me as a constituent, as an individual, but to the group that they represent. Now, to a degree, if they have an R after their name and it's a partisan office, their first loyalty should be to the people in their district that have an R after their name. But directly correlated to that is they should be first and foremost responsible to what is right and what is wrong, what is constitutional versus what is unconstitutional, and what makes sense versus what does not. Now, we don't see that across the board, but that is the ideal. And as an observation, that should be our expectation. And we should show respect, because respect is due. That translates to the municipal races, right? You know, the people that are in office at a city council or a school board. Now, I got to be honest, in McKinney, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. There are a few people that are in elected office that, quite frankly, themselves probably are not worthy of my respect. But the position that they hold, I have to show some respect. I have to, recognize there's an authority there. And I need to interact like it appropriately. Now, I got to tell you, most of my activist friends, they get it. They do it well, and they get their voices heard. Now, unfortunately, they hear them, but they don't listen. Or if they listen, they don't follow through. And things generally don't change, but they're never going to change if you just go in there and browbeat them and are abusive. When we're dealing with individual people, we have to remember that everybody's fallen, right? Nobody's perfect. Everybody has shortcomings. And revisiting the notion of you've been pulled over, you just don't know what's going on. That guy could be having a terrible day, or she might be having the day of her life, and your interaction with them could make or break that for them as well as yourself. Again, a little common respect here. Giving honor where honor is due. Now, I serve my family willingly. I have an extended family that, I look after. I have friends in my community, in my church, that I look after. I help out when I can, and it is my hope they'll reciprocate when the time comes. That's kind of a mutually agreed upon situation, that you look out for your friends, you look out for your extended family. It's not always, not all the time, because quite frankly, not everybody can do everything all the time. But it is a way to do things that makes sense. It's a way to help others around you. Again, showing the honor that is due. Now, unfortunately, you deal with people that are dishonorable, right? This is where it gets a little interesting. So if you're dealing with a person that's not an authority over you, in other words, so you don't owe them respect to their position, and they're dishonorable on top of it, how do you handle that? Well, I would tell you that we're told to treat them with respect anyway. I will tell you that there's a conflicting way to handle this, right? In Proverbs, it talks about, let the fool run his mouth. And other times it says, correct the fool. In following verses, if I remember correctly. But the notion is, it depends on what's going on, right? Sometimes it's worthwhile interfering. Sometimes it's best to just stay out of it. It's known as picking your battles. And I think that we show restraint and respect to what's going on when we choose not to jump in, not to muddy the water, not to make things more difficult than they already are. So now I want to give you a couple of things that I've seen play out in the last week or so, which is why I chose to do this out of order. Now, I know that there are a number of people out there that have R's after their name that are, I would say, rightfully concerned about Tulsi Gabbard, right? She comes left of center. She's from an offshoot of either Hinduism or Islam. I'm not sure that I'm necessarily a fan of that religion, but that's just a part of what that person is, right? We're talking about somebody that took three combat tours, more than I did, that's served long enough in the military that she's now a lieutenant colonel. It's more than I did. Now, does that make her automatically qualified to be the DNI, which is the Director of National Intelligence? No, I imagine not. But what it does do, it gives her credibility that some paper-pushing bureaucrat somewhere out there that has previously held that position doesn't have. What it does give us is somebody that's served in the military as well as served in Congress and has been, quite frankly, the victim of the deep state, the victim of the abuse of power. I don't know what your major malfunction is that you would not want that person in a position to reel that in, to hold those people accountable. I suspect that maybe you're just not aware of that. I suspect that maybe you're hung up on a couple of specific things, which, again, I'll grant you, are challenging, right? I don't necessarily want a devout Muslim to have access to all the intelligence information that we gather. I mean, I don't think I need to explain that, but it seems pretty self-evident that maybe that's not a good idea. Likewise, I wouldn't want a communist in there. And we have had both before, by the way, in positions of national prominence and access to all that intelligence. Let me ask you, do you think that was a net positive? That being said, somebody that's honorably served their country, honorably served in Congress, being nominated by the president is probably due that honor, probably due that respect. And whether or not you're necessarily 100% on board, keep in mind the very same folks that are complaining the most were just fine putting somebody on the Supreme Court that couldn't tell what a male or female was, or wouldn't say what a male or female was, because, quote, I'm not a biologist. Now, they expected us to accept that, and that was, a great example of intelligence and worthy of sitting on the Supreme Court of the United States, but we can't have somebody serve as the DNI because, well, the neocons don't like her. Now, I'm sorry. I might be persuaded that there are other valid reasons why, Tulsi Gabbard's not the right choice for the DNI. But so far, I've seen nothing to convince me otherwise. So far, I just hear the clanging bells of nothing. So, again, whether I love her or hate her, it's not really relevant. Can she do the job? Will she do it in a way that's responsible? I think the answer is yes to both. Now, you may disagree. You may think I'm wrong. You may think I've got it, out of sorts here. But again, the benefit of the doubt needs to go to the president. The benefit of the doubt needs to go to the person that's willing to do the job. And quite frankly, when we have unqualified people wearing robes, making decisions that affect the entire outcome of the country, and you're willing to go along with that, but you're going to lose sleep over this? Yeah, no, I'm not buying it. All right, let's jump on to the next thing here, the next example. And I heard somebody refer to Snowden as a traitor. Now, I suppose I could get into the weeds on this, and I suppose that, somebody could come after me for defending him and blah, 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 blah. Well, whatever. All I'm going to say is the guy took an oath, probably the same kind of oath that I took, which is defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And honestly, even if he didn't have an oath of office when he worked at the NSA, when he saw the NSA doing what the NSA was doing, i.e., trampling all over citizens, ignoring the constitutional constraints, and quite frankly, abusing authority and power that they probably should have never had in the first place, I'm sorry. I think he did the right thing. I think he did not act as a traitor towards his country. As a matter of fact, I think he answered to the higher law, the Constitution. He did the right thing. If anything, he called out those people that were legitimately traitors to the Constitution, legitimately traitors to we, the American people, that were violating our rights and taking a, let's say, a dim view on the constitutional protections that we enjoy. So rather than look at him as being the traitor, I would say wholeheartedly, I think the people that he ratted out were the traitors, the people that, he called to be, shall we say, put on notice. They're the traitors. Gotta be careful how I say that, right? The reality is, this is just another example. Now, whether, I can't remember the Bradley person's name, I'm not a fan of their life choices as far as how they want to mutilate their body, but it's Manning. Bradley Manning wants to be called Chelsea. Again, they did the right thing. In fact, the fact that Obama put one out and Trump should have got Snowden out of it, and I guess Biden did it before Trump could, speaks volumes. These people did the right thing. Now, whether their motivations were pure, I don't know. Whether I necessarily agree with what finally pushed them over the edge, I don't know. But they ratted out people that were violating the constitutional constraints. They were damaging we the people. They're not the traitors. Likewise, I'm gonna really step into it now. The people that seceded in the Civil War, right? Those that formed the Confederacy, they were not traitors. They left. If you're going to use that logic, then every single one of the founding fathers is a traitor. Now, I disagree with that as well, and I know there's some church people that think that that's wrong and that they should be held accountable for their bad choices and that they're wrong. Who cares? I mean, that's just dumb argument. They interpossessed the situation, right? They were elected officials, and they said that there was abuse of power by quote-unquote the higher power or by another power, and they interposed themselves between it. And as a result, they left and formed their own country. They didn't look to overthrow the government of the country they were a part of. They didn't put a coup on. They didn't do anything that would necessitate being called a traitor. But that's where we're at. I think that more honor is due Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, and any number of people than Ulysses S. Grant or Abraham Lincoln get. And I know as a good Republican, that's probably super inflammatory, but it's the truth. Abraham Lincoln ignored the Constitution. Abraham Lincoln blatantly violated the Constitution multiple times. And they're going to say, well, it was okay because he was at war. When we're at war, that's not really how that works. The reason why they're there is to prevent those abuses, whether we're at war or not. But again, he gets a free pass. We ignore it. We pretend it really didn't happen. And, because after all, winning the war and preserving the Union was far more important than, that silly old Constitution. So again, he was the president. He made a lot of hard choices. I don't agree with his choices, but to a certain degree, we have to show respect. To a degree, he paid the ultimate price, right? He was killed. Now, there's some question as to who killed him and why, but we'll just leave that one alone. So you can respect somebody but not agree with their motivations. You can show respect to an individual, particularly an elected official, even if you don't particularly like them or the things that they've done, because they're due that respect. You're supposed to show them some honor. Then, the challenge comes when you get it close to home, right? You can have a parent or a grandparent or an uncle or an aunt or whatever that is just a scoundrel. But they're in a position of honor in your family. How do you do that? How do you do it rightfully? That requires some introspective looking. Now, why do I bring this up? Why am I investing, 20, 30 minutes of your time to talk about this? I think it's because we get so wrapped up with what's important to us. We get so wrapped up on the right thing. Hey, look, I'm guilty of this too. I'd like to say more so in the past than now, but nevertheless, we get hung up on doing the right thing, or that person's just wrong, and we don't want to listen or give them credit for anything. We just need to take a pause. We need to take a step back and look at things objectively. Do they have a reasonable argument for what they did? Do they have a reasonable understanding that even though we don't agree with it, we can at least see how they got to that conclusion? Should we not be respectful of that? It is not worthy of consideration. Again, as I've said many times, it'd be very simple for me to show up on the show, throw some bombs, call some people some names, make some gross generalizations, and then disappear. But who would I be serving? And that's the other thing, or I should say probably the final point here. As a Christian man, I believe I serve something higher, right? I have my family, of course, but I serve my Creator God, right? The man that saved me from eternal damnation. Now, look, there's some people out there that are very uncomfortable with that statement. They don't believe the same way. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. You're free to believe as you might. I'm going to tell you that I think you're wrong, but I'm not going to hate you. I'm not going to hate on you. I'm happy to have a conversation at any time, but I'm going to treat you with respect because you're another individual. You're worthy of respect by the mere fact that you exist. Pretty sure that that's a tenet that's not necessarily unique to Christianity, but certainly proposed and promoted through Christianity. Christianity has taught us to set aside our in-group preferences, which, to be honest, has had some long-term consequences that perhaps we didn't do it the right way or we didn't give it enough thought. But we're supposed to be one in Christ. We're supposed to be brothers in Christ, or sisters if you prefer. But that doesn't mean that we reject who our family is. It doesn't mean that we ignore who our community is. It doesn't mean that none of that matters. We serve both our Lord, we serve our family, and to a degree we serve our community. When I've spoken to some of the elected officials, they talk about there's just a culture of service, that they feel drawn to serve. I get it. I feel the same way. I serve my community in different ways because I feel drawn to it. Whether it's stuff I've done in church, whether I've done it in politics, whether I've just done for friends and extended family, I do it because I felt drawn to serve. I look at it as a way to show respect and honor. Now, you might look at it differently, and you may choose to exhibit that differently. That's okay. But you really would benefit from just taking a pause and consider before you tongue lash somebody that you disagree with, before you cancel somebody, and that goes on both sides of the aisle that happens for, a significant disagreement. You really need to consider, is there a way to let it go? Is there a way that you can't let it be an impediment to you personally? Now, what does that look like for you? I don't know. For me, it means I have to let go of a lot of different things. And at times that can be a challenge. And at times I'm not always successful. But I know that about myself. And if I should forget, my wife will be glad to remind me. But you, as my listener out there, you need to take this away from me. What I'm telling you is have a little grace. Give a little space. Respect the other people. Realize that there might be an opportunity for you to serve them. There might be an opportunity to build a relationship that doesn't exist. The key thing that I'm driving at here is respect is a precursor to community. I've talked to more than one person that they've said, well, we respect private property rights. We respect personal autonomy. And my thought is, but do you really? Do you really? And I don't want to fight with them, and I don't want to press them on the spot, but it's something that I always keep in the back of my mind. You say this, but do you really mean it? We came through the crisis, if you will, of a little under 5 years ago, whereupon there was a whole lot of people that were told they need to alter their entire lifestyle and nothing about their life mattered but for some other people that might have a problem. And when that wasn't enough, they ratcheted it up more and more and more, and a whole lot of people went along with it. And sadly, my people that rejected that, my people that resisted it, we returned attitude in kind to people that, quite frankly, disagreed with us on what the best way it was to deal with it for them personally. And while I was never a big fan of several things that were done, I can understand why somebody else might want to do that, whether it was covering their face, whether it was injecting themselves with something. That's their choice. I think in many cases they were ill-informed or bad choices, but it's still their choice. And that doesn't give me a right to treat them poorly, or me a right to dismiss them in their concerns. Now, fortunately, most of the people on my side, my team, if you will, we're a little better than that. And most of us figured that out. Maybe a quick slap on the wrist and they moved on and, yeah, you're right, I shouldn't do that. Now, unfortunately, the vast quantity of people, they're still losing sleep over this. They're still mad about it. They would do nothing more than destroy anybody that stood in their way. And you got to ask yourself, why is that? Now, the real question is, are they worthy of your respect? Can you show them respect? Can you show them common courtesy and decency? So today's call of action, if you will, show the respect that is due to people just because they exist. Honor those around you. Should you hold them accountable? Absolutely. Should you press them if you think they're wrong? Wouldn't have it any other way. But you can do it in a way that you're not the problem. At any rate, that's all I got for today. With that, I will see you on the other side.
For all your Texas fashion tees, it's TexianPride.com. Whether you're out honky-tonkin' in Austin, bucking Broncos in Fort Worth, or strolling the San Antonio Riverwalk, Texian Pride is here for you. Support a Texan-owned business and show off your love for Texas with style. Visit TexianPride.com for your next fashionable Texas tee.